and we will post it on mcfliss.org after the session is over. We'll put it in the continuing education area. I'll let you know where that's available. First of all, my name is Steve Heiser. I'm the Library Systems Administrator. For those of you who don't know me, I think most of you know who I am at this point. Just a few housekeeping things. We're going to try see how this works. We have done this in the past via GoToMeeting for training, and it seems to work out best if we mute all the participants for the presentation part, and then you can send your questions via the chat window at the end of the session. I think we'll have plenty of time for that type of thing. I'm also wanted to let you know that even though what we see here today is going to be identical to what we're going to be using on April 2nd regarding Sierra, I am using a training server for this exercise, and it allows us much more access to elements that we will not be able to see in our current preview mode when we go live with staff here this week. So you'll see things you won't be able to see in preview mode up until April 2nd, but everything should look the same after that point. Okay, so I've got two goals for this training. For those of you who are going to be attending training, other training sessions, I'm going to start out with essentially the same type of format, give you an introduction to Sierra, and then we'll focus on the module-specific things at the near the end of the session. For example, circulation today, we'll focus on that. But for the most part, these training sessions will be pretty much the same to start out with, and then we'll deal with the details later on. The primary goal is to give you what you need to know to be able to work with Sierra on April 2nd and moving forward. And the secondary goal is to give you assurance that most of the functions work in exactly the same way as they do in Millennium. I've played around now with Sierra for the better part of a month and a half, and I can tell you that the organization of the information is different. Getting around is different, but the functionality for the most part is almost identical. And I'm going to show you how that is working today, and you'll find out very quickly that those of you who have worked with Millennium for any length of time will find that it's very similar and will be easy to work with once you get access. Okay, and before I start the meat of the presentation, I also want to talk about the timetable. This week, I was hoping today, but apparently it's not going to happen. We're going to start the staff preview. We've been working for the better part of 3 weeks on getting logins set up for all the staff within the system, and it's a big job because there's about 900 or so users, including logins on the system. So we've got most of that done. That's ready to go, but we're waiting on an issue with logins that needs to be fixed before we can release it to the staff. But I'm hoping that that will happen this week. And just so you know that when you do get your staff preview, the biggest things we're going to have to check out right now before April 2nd are the ability to log in, whether or not your password actually works. You're not going to be able to see everything or make edits to records, send notices, for example. It's more or less a way to look at the data and get comfortable with the interface. So if you're prevented from doing certain operations, which you'll see a lot of in preview mode, it's not because of your authorizations more necessarily. It's locked down for any kind of changes to the database, and it's locked down for everyone, including myself. The two biggest things to look at in staff preview mode this week when it goes live is to check to see if your printers are working. That's a big one. You can also view records and try to print them. That'll be a nice test of the printing. And And be aware that your printer settings may need to change initially, particularly on the Format tab for local printers. When we move to this Sierra, many of you have a setting that will looks to the last workstation used for that login, and so those will need to be kind of built up again because we're moving from one ILS system to another. The other thing to check would be your settings area under admin settings. It works identically to Millennium, but those are where your macros are stored, and we had to do a lot of work on macros to get those to work correctly. So I know Cert uses a lot of macros, and we've done a pretty good job about making sure that those work for the most part. All that information was migrated over from Millennium in this last week of January. So we should have everything come over. We're verifying that is working correctly, and that your help will be needed in that area too. Lastly, April 2nd is our go live date. The system will be unavailable the entire day, similar to January 20th. Offline Cert will be available. This is kind of an important point to make. We will be needing to use on April 2nd something new called the Sierra Offline Cert program. It looks identical to the other offline Cert, but it uses a different port number. Now, most of the suburban libraries should have this, but I will need to get it out to others that maintain their own computers. But we'll get that out to you within the next week or so, so that you have it. We have a nice installer for this. It looks identical to the Millennium Offline Cert. It just uses a different port number so that it can communicate with the Sierra server. Okay, so let's get into talking about the login process. This is where it's going to be different for different staff. For the suburban staff, and this is all suburban staff, you will be logging in using your initials in Sierra. There is no MC40, MCAT, MSER logins for the suburban libraries moving forward on April 2nd. You will be using your user initials, and most of the work we had to do with the suburban libraries basically revolved around merging the login information from your Cert logins, MC40, into your user initials so that you would be able to have everything in one unified login. For the Milwaukee public staff, because you rotate between branches, you will be needing to use the same process you're using now with Millennium, so nothing's really going to change much. The logins will change because we had to recreate some of the elements of the login, but it will be simplified. But you will be logging in with kind of a generic login to set your location and printers, and then you will be asked to input your user initials. So it's going to be a very similar process to what you're doing now with Millennium. Okay. So I'm going to log into the test server here. And don't ask me why it's MFCLS. That is not something I had any control over. It will take a few seconds to log into this server, but this is basically your login process for suburban libraries. The reason we had this hold up with the staff preview is that the MPL process requires a different type of login called a context user or a context login, and that's what's holding up the works for that part. As soon as you see your initials gray out, that means it's making a connection to the server, and then it will hopefully pop in the Sierra user client very shortly after that. Okay, hopefully you now see a screen now that looks like a basically a search screen at the very top here. If that's not the case, let me know through the chat interface, and I can try to do some changing around here. Okay. So this is the Sierra login screen. This is how I'm set up to log into Sierra on their training server. The biggest difference you'll see right away is that Sierra uses a unified client. We've talked about this a number of times, but the biggest difference is that there is no more circulation module, cataloging module, serials module. All of that is basically unified under one client so that there is no switching around between different screens. You can see everything underneath one client application. And the way that works is this function area here at the top in the upper right hand corner indicates all of the different areas that you have access to. So for example, I have all these different what we call workflows underneath this training login that I have. And based on your initials or your login, this can be altered or changed. So that instead of switching around to different modules, for example, going from Cert to cataloging or Cert to serials, you would just switch to serials check-in, or you would switch to circulation desk. It's moving around from one function to the next. The command menu that you see here in the top upper left is virtually identical to Millennium. There's not a whole lot of changes here. I will point out one significant change a little bit later. But here again you have File, your Select Printer. All of this is identical to Millennium in terms of printer selection. Your Edit menu is essentially the same. View, Record View Properties, all of these areas here are the same. The one area that is a little different is underneath Tools here. There's this area called Browse Query, which I'll highlight here in a few minutes. But that's only available, it's kind of context sensitive. It's available under the Catalog function or under Search Holds, which is underneath Circulation at the bottom. It looks pretty much identical. You'll notice that I'm using some different terms to describe also some of these different areas here on this drop down. These large areas here, cataloging students, serials check-in, front desk circ, media, these are now referred to as workflows rather than modules. Not that it makes a big difference, but that's kind of the equivalent. A module, for example, front desk circ, or let's see, serials module is now a serials workflow. And then every one of these steps or subheadings underneath serials is referred to as a function. So the buttons that you might use on the serials module, serials check-in, routing, claiming, all of these are now functions underneath the serials workflow, for what it's worth. Also, one thing I wanted to highlight here underneath the command menu was the underneath admin and settings. This is kind of one of those areas I want you to check once preview comes up. You'll notice this is quite a lot of information now. They've had to basically combine everything that was part of the initials and the logins together into one area, so you actually see everything connected with your particular login. There is a macros area here that you can actually verify to check to see that your macros are set up correctly. Most of you will not be able to change permanently the macro settings, but you can notify us if there's something not working correctly, and we can make changes here at MCFLS. We've been doing it now for a while, so it shouldn't be a big deal to do that. But all your macros had to be changed because there is an additional step underneath the Go command menu. You'll notice now that instead of just being a Go menu that's specifically pointing to modes for example, serials, you have to, because everything's combined, you have to include an extra step to identify which workflow you're dealing with. So acquisitions, administration, you could literally have a macro set up for each one of these if you wanted to. But we've pretty much mimicked whatever you are using in Millennium and brought it over into the Sierra logins that we're setting up right now. And one thing I wanted to stress is all the modules and functions in Millennium have counterparts in Sierra. I have not seen anything that would contradict that. Everything you're working with in Millennium will be able to be done in Sierra. And also with Millennium, just because you see a function does not mean you have access. So for example, if I see in circulation the ability to merge duplicate patron records, if I don't have the authorizations to do that in Millennium, I'm not going to have authorization to do that in Sierra. So whatever you had authorization to do in Millennium, you will have essentially the same authorizations in Sierra. You're not going to have anything different, or anything more, I should say. Now these workflows, which one of the nice things about Sierra is that these workflows can be modified. So you can actually create a unique workflow for example, a cataloging student or someone doing serials check-in. They don't have to see everything that's on this list for serials. You can just create one that's specifically simplified for the staff that you're working with. Now, we initially we're going to give everybody as much of these functions as possible, even if you're not authorized to use them, so you can get your work done on April 2nd and following. So you'll see everything you need to see on April 2nd. That's the goal. This preview period between this week and April 2nd will be a good time to identify those workflows or functions that you need but you're not seeing. So that would be really helpful for us to make sure that those are ironed out. Another great thing about Sierra that I wanted to highlight was Sierra means no more locked or busied records, and in theory no more broken holds. So the way it works with the Postgres database is that one person could be editing a record and another person could open that record as well and make the changes and save it. So that it doesn't have to lock the record in order to save changes. So an example of that is, for example, e-commerce patrons will no longer have problems paying fines once their record is open. If the fines aren't being touched by this, the Open Millennium session or Open Sierra session, it's not going to affect their ability to pay off their fines. So it'll work the way it's intended to, the way it should be. Okay, so I'm going to start with search holds mode. I have this up right now, and we'll just go through a couple of examples about how the catalog works, and then we'll move on to more specific circulation functions. Okay, so I'm just going to do a title search. I have all of our indices, I guess, are available here underneath the drop-down menu as they are in Millennium. I'm just going to type in this is their database, so it's not ours. Okay, so this is pretty much how our Sierra database is going to look when we go live. A couple differences, however, of course, is the locations and everything like that. But we use the same indices as before: title, author, subject. You can double-click on a title to get to the full record. What I wanted to point out to you was this neat little thing on the side in this corner of the this first title here. You'll notice that there's an icon. It's in the far right-hand side. If I mouse over that, it gives me more information about the title, so I don't necessarily have to click or double-click on the entry to see all this information. If I wanted to see that, I can just mouse over the I to take a look at it. You'll notice these icons all over Sierra, not only for bibliographic records, but also for patron records. Will be a quick way to see information about all the information regarding the patron, or the most relevant fields right away. Also want to point out something that's a little different here in Sierra is this summary column. It will show you available copies and how many items are attached to our particular bibliographic record. So this one has one item. This one down below here, number 4, has 3 items. What they mean by available is at least one of the copies is available. It does not mean all the copies are. In preview, they don't have it set up here, but when our preview is set up to go, you will also see a book jacket. So we're getting all that information that we currently have in Millennium, and that will show up in this preview column on the far right-hand side. On the far left-hand side of the column, you have these facets now that are going to be new to Sierra. So if you're doing a quick search and you wanted to limit it to a particular location, you could click on it just like you do in Encore. It's very similar. And you click on the facet and it will narrow it down to that particular location. That's just one example of how that would work. I think it'll be a good help for searching, I believe. And these are available in all workflows, including, pretty sure it will also, yeah, it does show up in circulation when you're doing a patron record search or a patron name search. We'll actually take a look at that in a second. The other thing I wanted to point out to you is the plus sign here at the top next to the search box. This is a replacement for the limit function. So if you click on this plus sign, it brings up the limiting function. So your publication, material type, language, publisher, all these elements that were part of Millennium are also here, and they should work a lot better because of the Lucene indexing that's taking place, and also the Postgres SQL database should make that work a lot better. I wasn't aware of this, but I noticed this too, is that you can actually add an additional year or search here if you wanted to add that, like if you wanted to add material types. I think that's probably be more appropriate, like for example maps and archives or something like that. You could do a limit using that setup by adding 2 material types here if you wanted to. But this is actually in Millennium right now. Okay, we're going to take a look at the full record. I'm just going to do another search here. Okay, if I double click on the record, this is your full record display here in Sierra. Looks a little bit different. I'll go through some of these, but a lot of this will look the same to many of you. You'll notice that the tabs along the top that used to be in Millennium have been moved over to the left-hand side of the page as buttons. So you'll see this a lot throughout Sierra, that they've replaced a lot of the tabs with buttons, and actually, to my mind anyway, it looks a lot cleaner and a lot easier to use, just my personal opinion. But all of the information is here that you're used to seeing. You can go to summary. Their list looks a little bit different than ours, but if you wanted to see all the records, you would just click on that, and then you would see all of the attached records to this particular bibliographic record. If you wanted to look at a specific item record, you just click on, either double click on the summary area or click on the record button here on the left hand side. And you'll notice a lot of this looks identical. This is a typical item record here in Sierra. They've done a lot of changes. You'll notice that the subfields here, 1, 2, B, G, these are all highlighted in different colors. I believe that can be changed. This is just their default setup. So if for whatever reason you didn't want that color or didn't want that highlighted, we can most likely remove that. But you'll see almost all of the other fields are identical. There's really nothing too much different here with this particular display. Now if we go up to the top, you'll notice that we have many of the same buttons: view, edit, print, export. If we go to edit, I'm just going to click on edit here, and take a look at the full record, you can see how much different this looks. This is actually much different than what we're currently using with Millennium. The information is still there, but the layout, particularly of the mark tags and indicators, is a lot different than it is in Millennium. And this, apparently, based on what I've heard, is created to look more like an OCLC display. I'm not sure what the benefit is to that, but it does look a little bit cleaner in terms of, what is an indicator, what is a tag, these subfields. It just looks a little bit cleaner. And just to reiterate, all of the codes that we have, location codes, loan rules, all that coding that we had in Millennium has been migrated over and will continue to be migrated over to Sierra, to our installation of Sierra. The seeding is pretty much done, and they're constantly updating the database. But for the most part, all of our settings, loan rules, all of that has been brought over. One thing I did want to point out to you is a little new in Sierra is this browse button in the upper left-hand corner. This is new based on kind of how they've laid out screens. I don't think you have this in Millennium. But if you click on this, it just goes back to the browse results for that search that we did for Inferno for the title. When you're dealing with some of you, not so much for Cert, but for cataloging serials, you may have your login set up to do multi-window mode. And when you hit that browse button, you have other windows open, for example, other records open. It will not close those windows. You have to close those manually, but it will take the main screen back to the browse. And you'll play around with that. You'll see what I'm talking about. And one last thing, I've shown this to a few people, directors and Cert services, but I wanted to just talk about it again. And that's this cool new thing called the browse query. If you're in search holds mode or catalog mode, you can see this. I keep using the word mode, sorry. It's function. If you are in search holds mode or catalog mode, you can see this, but other functions won't have this available. If you go underneath Tools and click on Browse Query, it brings up this this little window. It looks like a create list search, and in fact, it's using all of the power of create lists. But what you end up with is essentially a results list based on the information that you're putting in here. And this is great for when you want the granularity of create lists, but you don't want to necessarily save that information. I'm thinking for sometimes when you want to do a very quick search for information that's not indexed, for example, in our case, an email address or a telephone number, and the results come back very quickly. It's not like you have to wait for the software to get through the entire record list. You know what I'm saying? It has, with Create Lists, you have to go through each record and check each field, and then it accumulates records for your results. Here it's almost instantaneous. So if we're on their test database, so we'll find some goofy stuff in here. But if we did, for example, look at patron records, and we select the patron telephone field, here it's P201, but it's in ours it would be T or P. And we do has, and I know that the telephone number has a certain number of digits. I would use a search like this if someone contacted me saying that they were getting teleforms messages but aren't a member of our system. We'd be able to identify who had an incorrect telephone number and deal with the situation. So we could do a real quick search here, and then all of the phone numbers that include that string of 5555 will include in a results list. So even if you're in search holds mode, it doesn't really matter. This is pulling up patron records that you can actually then view from this results list. So if I wanted to take a look at this particular patron and make a correction to the phone number, or perhaps put in a message or an alert that this patron phone number needs to be changed, I could do that very quickly right here. If I want to go back to this browse results, I just click this browse button again, and we're back to this list of results that I just put together. Now it's really good for quick searches for information that's not indexed, like phone numbers and email addresses, but it's really not great for large result sets. I did this on our own system, and if the result set is pretty large, it will take some time to put together. It'll still work, but this is really good for when you want a quick search for something that you don't want to spend a whole lot of time putting a create list search together. You can do it real quickly and it will come up right away. You can also use this with existing searches, for example, a create list search that you've done that's already existing, or retrieving a saved query. So if you have a saved query that you know you're going to be using quite a bit, perhaps this telephone number search or email search, you can bring that right in here with the browse query. I'm not sure. Let's see your patron phone number search. There you go. Obviously, this is not something you probably want to use, but but you can modify. You can kind of use your imagination to bring in a different search. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out to you because I think it's one of the really nice parts about Sierra is this ability to do this browse query. Okay, so I wanted to bring up some aspects of the circulation functions and just go through all of them very quickly so that you can see what they're looking like. So I'm going to go to my function drop-down, and I'm going to go to the circulation area here. For the suburban libraries, this is pretty much what your circulation mode is or workflow is going to look like when the preview goes live. And after we've had time to settle in and everything's working with Sierra, we'll have time to create workflows for libraries if necessary that will work better for your for your library. Okay, so I'm going to go to circulation desk mode. And as you can see here, again, the tabs that used to be along the top of the frame have now been moved over to the left side of the screen as buttons. So it's just a different layout, but everything is still here. I'm going to do a quick search for one of the innovative trainers here. And this isn't just an example of this these facets here on the left-hand side. If I had a larger result set, we'll just do that real quick. This would be more typical of perhaps patron search in our database, but you can actually view all of the patron names here that are in the database and just click on one. So if I wanted to look at Fiona Smith, it'll pop that name right into our screen here, so we can take a look at what she's got. She's got 2 checked out items, and this looks almost identical to what we're doing in Millennium. I'm going to close her out and go back to my trainer because he's got a lot more stuff on his record. I just select his name, comes up. So he's got a message, please come back to Cert desk for lost item. But as you can see, he doesn't have any, well, he has 1 checked out item. And again, you have to right click to get to the item. He's got 2 holds. And again, you can do all of these same functions that you have in Millennium with holds. So if I wanted to modify this particular hold, I could do that. I could put a not wanted after date, hold note, essentially everything that you're used to using. Finds look identical. If I went to right click, I could view the find. It's just a manual find. Very much the same. And he's got linked patrons, but we're not going to take a look at that. No one uses that in the system. Okay. Now, if I'm doing a browse, I'm just going to close this out. I just want to show you the browse mode for this. You'll notice that for each of these patrons in the browse mode, this eye comes up, and this will be identical to what you're going to see in our database. We're actually going to have quite a few more fields in addition to what they've got here, because most of the libraries have quite a bit of more information. This is more typical of what you'll see in our database. So you'll have notes, messages, their email address, all this information will show up here underneath this eye when you mouse over it. I did want to show you one other thing. If we look at Fiona's, it's kind of hard to see on the screen. You may be able to make this out, but this type in checked out items is in a red type, and it's that way because she has got 2 overdue items. So it's kind of an alert. I believe Millennium has something similar with the red type that would indicate there's some kind of problem with the checked out items, or if they have fines, that might also show up in red type. So that's something that that I noticed when doing this as well. Okay. So that's just a real quick overview of circulation desk mode. Works almost identically to Millennium. It's just that the organization of the information is a little bit different. If we go to search holds mode, we can walk through the process of placing a hold very quickly. So we'll use this title again. So we've got one item attached to this record. If we wanted to do a hold copy return soonest, do a name again. Choose him, hit select. And then we would choose the pickup location. I don't think this number of holds is applicable to us. It doesn't, I don't believe it has any bearing on us, but I could be wrong. I'll check on that. But then you would have your not wanted before, not wanted after, hit OK, page for title. And then you could see the bib level hold has been placed with this particular patron that we set up. Okay, so it's a real quick way of doing a hold. It looks identical to Millennium. If we go to check-in, again, this looks pretty close to what we're currently using. The backdate function is here. We have fines. I'm not sure about this wave charges and items being checked in. That might be something that I don't believe we have in Millennium here. I'll take a quick look. So I've got Millennium here. Yeah, I don't see that function here, so I don't believe it's turned on for us. But that is something that they have enabled on this test server. I'll go to notices just to show you what that looks like. Choose our local printer. As you can see, they don't have too many notice jobs set up, but this is where you would find those set up for your library, and you can just sort on job name as you do now. Find your paging slip jobs and just run it just the way that you do right now. Let's see if we can find a good test here. I guess not. Okay, but you can get an idea. This is somewhat similar to what you're used to seeing in Millennium. There's not too much of a difference here. View outstanding holds is now called view outstanding holds. It used to be view holds and in Millennium, and now it's view outstanding holds. And again, this is set up for your particular pickup location. Since I'm not set up with a pickup location in this training server, it's just set to all. But normally that would be like Greenfield Cert, Hales Corner Cert, MPL Central, and then you could do a search based on your hold status or status of the item to find your items. You can just see if there's anything here. This looks identical to Millennium as well. One of the things I was a little disappointed with is that there's really not a good way to output this data in this mode. So what I was hoping for was like an Excel button or something like that where you could export the data to some kind of spreadsheet application that you could work with. But one of the things I'll be doing soon after we go live is finding a better way to output this data using the SQL output that we can work with. And so that's one of the applications I think we can use with SQL to get into the database and pull it out, which is something we can't do with Millennium. Okay, a couple more things to look at here. Let's see. Must not have added this one. Let's see. Looking for fines paid. I know it exists because I've seen it before. Well, anyway, sorry about that. I don't see it here. But that, again, looks identical to Millennium, so you're not really missing a whole lot. Let's see. And then the last one, I just wanted to share and just reassure you that the print templates will work the same as they do in Millennium. So anybody using their custom hold slips, your transit slips, your spine label templates, all of those have been brought over already. And actually, I've tested those out myself on our preview version, and it works pretty well. But that's something you may just want to take a look at. But I've looked at all the logins, and they seem to have been brought over just fine. So that should work just great. Last thing I wanted to share with you before we get to questions is that we do have a few known issues as of February this month. With Sierra, there is a known issue for globally purged fines. If you're looking for fines that have been globally purged, meaning something that I would do on this end, if you're, for example, deleting fines off of your patron records globally, like I do for you for a few libraries, that data will not show up right now, but will be available in a future release. So it's significant, but it's not not going to stop people from being able to do globally purged fines. It's just that the data doesn't show up in fines paid. I can get that data out of the SQL if you really need to look at it, but it sounds like that's something that they're working on. And also in some records, for holds, we're unable to remove or change the not needed after date. That's kind of a significant one for us because that automatically gets set to 1 year once the hold is set. Again, it's one of those things you kind of have to keep in mind, but I think it should be fixed relatively soon because that's a significant issue that needs to be resolved. It is in software engineering for what it's worth. Okay, so that's pretty much the bulk of my presentation here. Does anyone have any questions that I can address? Okay, Margaret's got a question. Will we also have those separate fields for first and last name? That's a great question. I've actually asked them about how our names are going to be indexed. It's a little tricky for us because we do not use commas in our names, as you well know. It's usually last name, first name, then middle initial for a typical name. So I'm not sure what to answer that yet. I know the fields are there in our preview mode, but I'm not sure if they're going to work like it looks like it should. But that's a great question. I will try to get an answer for you for that. Okay. Let's see here. Jennifer Williams has a question. She's wondering if we need a letter when searching for patron, or if we need the letter N when searching for patron, or M for address. Yes, if it's indexed, that's correct. So you still need to put that in if you're browsing for a patron by name. You still need to put that in. We can actually take a quick look at that to verify that. So you can key or scan a patron barcode. You'll still need to put an N for name, and then the last I'm just putting in. Okay, so it didn't find it because I typed it incorrectly. But the same goes for every one of these. We have indexes for barcode, name, unique ID, family ID. This is their test database, so it's a little different from ours, but the typical ones are barcode and name. And there might be some other ones I'm just not thinking of. Record number for sure also would be one that we could use. But that's the case. Clay has a question regarding patron photos. Will the patron photos still appear? And the answer is yes. It doesn't appear in this test database, but I've already seen it in our preview mode that it will appear in the record. And it definitely appears underneath the eye when you mouse over the eye to take a look at it. And I believe it also will appear, if you can look at my screen here, we can take a look. Where you see this eye appear here on the far right-hand side of the screen, that's where the patron photo is going to appear. So it's virtually identical to where it is right now in terms of location. Greenfield also has a question about the linked patron function. Well, that's a great question. We have the linked patron. It used to be called the family patron function. And that's available to us in Millennium, but no one's really taken advantage of it so far. This is basically where you would link patrons together. For example, Michael and Leah Monroy are part of their family. This is Leah is Michael's daughter, so that you could actually link to other patrons using that same this interface here. It's a little problematic because it's more of a policy decision on who gets linked to which record and all of the issues that come about from that. I hope that answers that question. It is available now, but nobody has taken advantage of it because more of the policy decision than functionality. It does work, but who gets access and who gets linked to who is the big question. You have to figure that out on a library by library basis. Okay. Jennifer Williams says, when can I play with this with my staff and actually click on text screens? I'm hoping that we'll have everything done this week. I can't give you an actual day because I don't want to build you up too much, but most of the logins are complete. It's these context users that we have to set up that aren't working correctly for the MPL staff. So if I can get this done within the next couple of days, I'm hopeful. I know that we've been working hard with Innovative to get their software engineering staff to do this. They have identified the problem. They know it needs a code level fix, and I'm hoping they're going to have good news for me today because I'm meeting with them at 3 o'clock. So I'm hopeful this week sometime if we can get it going. And we need at least a couple. I was hoping this week, but it might be next week before everybody is able to see the test screens. Any other questions? Just so you're aware, we will have a Q&A very close to the time that we go live. So if you do have other questions that we haven't addressed here and just come up, within the next couple of weeks, those Q&A sessions are pretty much wide open in terms of direction. So if there's something that comes up, those are going to be on the 26th and 27th, and you can attend those and just raise any question that comes up regarding anything. The migration, what's going to happen April 2nd, specific questions regarding your setup at your library. We can address those. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to have you guys play around with this and take a look at it. I just apologize it's not today, but we will have that available very soon. So thank you very much. If there aren't any other questions, we can go ahead and end the session. So thanks a lot for your time, and I hope it was informative and helpful for you. Thanks very much.